Welcome, ACSA family, to Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. As always, Wes Smith, proud to serve each of you as your executive director. Really, really exciting opportunity tonight. We've got an expert in the field, Dr. Pamela Cantor, that's going to be sharing some information with us, some resources that they've developed just for us and made available to ACSA members. So besides learning from her tonight, learning with her, there'll be some resources you can use to improve your work and your efforts. Michael Kelly, who's part of our production team, even said they're so good, he's going to use the resources with his own family. So there's a big endorsement from Michael. I want to let you know that tonight, Dr. Cantor, the work that she wants to share, it's pretty extensive. And so we plan on going a little longer than 30 minutes, probably 45 or so to get through this. It also means that I don't have as much time to give updates or clarifications about things that are happening at the state level. There is going to be an announcement tonight at 6 o'clock. The CDPH guidelines around elementary waivers, clarifications there, clarifications that if you want to do small groups, that you don't need a waiver for that. So we'll look forward to that happening. I would just ask you to tune in Wednesday to the legislative lunch break. I'm sure Edgar will take some time there to talk about the CDPH guidelines, the waiver, small groups, and anything else we learn. He'll also be meeting with Ryan Smith from the Partnership for Los Angeles. Ryan is just a family member here at ACSA. As we say, he's a brother from another mother. Love the guy. He'll be great. And then Tuesday, we have a campus tour with Denny Seagrave, and she's in Val Verde. I'm going to talk about leading where she grew up and how they're doing work with STEAM and STEM in this community. Well, look, let's get after it. We've been talking all spring and summer about reopening, about loss of learning, about meeting the needs of our students. And ACSA has been the loudest voice on demanding high quality teaching and learning for our students that is equitable and important for this conversation, that meets their social and emotional needs, that we have to prioritize the mental wellness and supports thereof for our students, our staffs, and ourselves. And so we've been calling on the state to prioritize these things. We've been trying to bring resources to you, and many of you have been asking about resources and best practices around the mental wellness, around stress, about distress, and how we handle it. And so tonight, really, really pleased to introduce to all of you an expert in science of learning and development, as well as the science of stress and trauma. And so welcome, Dr. Pamela Cantor, to Common Purpose. We're so excited to have you. And, I'd love for the audience just to get to know a little bit more about you. So could you tell us something about you and your organization, Turnaround for Children, which I understand was founded right after 9/11. Curiously, I wonder how the trauma of 9/11 compares to the trauma of the COVID pandemic. Are there similarities? Are there differences that we should know about and understand?
Thank you so much, Wes. It's a great privilege to be here with you and with your community. Yes, my organization, Turnaround for Children, was founded in the aftermath of 9/11. And at the time, I was a practicing child psychiatrist in New York, specializing in trauma. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, I was asked to help lead a study to assess the impact of 9/11 on New York City's public school kids. And the finding that surprised all of us at the time was that the most startling effects on children were not in the ground zero schools. They were in the children and communities of deepest poverty. And I'll never forget walking into an elementary school in the South Bronx. I walked into a first grade class where a teacher was trying to help her kids digest this event, and she asked her students to do a drawing. And a little boy named Thomas came up to me, couldn't have been more than 6 years old. And he showed me his picture. And in it, there were these two boxes in the background with smoke coming out. And in the foreground, there were two stick figure drawings of boys with guns pointed at each other. Thomas's drawing carried a message. It said, "I'm scared of the violence I see every day when I come to school. I'm scared to come to school. And 9/11 is very far away." It was the immediate local context of this child's life that was producing fear and stress and activating the biologic mechanisms that we'll be talking about. And not surprisingly, these symptoms were most intense where the system had been activated before because of prior trauma. Today, the stress and trauma that children are witnessing and feeling is all around us, on our city streets, in our homes, on TV, and social media 24/7. Many children today feel like Thomas, especially if they are Black and brown children. 9/11, the protests, and COVID. Well, unlike 9/11, the pandemic is happening to all of us. And now the combined effects of COVID, the economic hardship, the racial trauma, and political unrest have dramatically escalated the inequities that we all knew were there and magnified the uncertainties about what is ahead. That 1 in 3 parents of infants and toddlers are skipping and reducing meals, that nearly 17 million students do not have access to broadband, and that all of this is concentrated in low-income communities are powerful indicators of the injustices of today and the risks to health and academic growth that they carry. In addition to all of this, there is a unique paradox in the time of COVID, and that is that to keep ourselves physically safe, we need to be physically distant. And this has disrupted the crucial connections to teachers and friends and communities of faith, even members of our own families, the very connections we need to feel safe, to manage stress and fear, and to build our resilience. And the crisis of trust that people, especially young people of color, are witnessing and experiencing right now, where those who should protect them don't, won't, or can't. Today, trust is really broken.
Wow, thank you for those data points as well. I mentioned to you before on this topic of being isolated and threatening that trust, those connections. That's why we started this program at ACSA, was just to connect our members and have a conversation once a week. And it's grown while we're still connecting. We're trying to edify and develop and give hope. We had other education researchers say as well that the COVID pandemic is the most significant thing to happen in public education, including the Civil War, the Great Depression, and 9/11. Yeah. And having you just share that perspective, I think really, really reinforces that. Let's dive into the COVID pandemic. It's caused all sorts of disruptions for everyone. Kids being out of school, remote learning is going to be the norm in the fall. Parents are working from home, or they're going to essential jobs and putting themselves at risk of contracting the virus. I know that one of your areas of expertise, as I mentioned, is the science of learning and development, including the science of stress and trauma. Can you lay a foundation here for us? Help us understand something about the stress of this time, how it will impact the way young people develop and learn, and what do adults most need to know?
Wes, one of the things I know is that you and your audience really do understand that this is a unique moment in time, a unique moment in history. With COVID-19, the nationwide protests, and the national reckoning on systemic racism. No one feels truly safe today, but Black children and Black mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers rightfully feel more threatened than anyone. And trust, which was already fragile, is broken. So as children ask themselves, will I be safe running down my street? Will I be safe sitting on my porch? Will I be safe going to school? This is going to present an enormous challenge when children do return to their classrooms. Because how can you learn effectively when your brain keeps thinking, watch out, watch out? Before COVID-19 and the events of the last few months, if I had had the opportunity to talk to you about human development, the development of the brain, and learning science, I would have begun with this. Each of us has 20,000 genes in our human genome. Yet in our lifetime, less than 10% of those genes will ever be expressed. So what do you think determines what's in the 10%? It's context. The environments, experiences, and relationships in our lives. The context that we're exposed to is the primary driver of who we become, including the expression of our genes. There is no separation between nature and nurture, biology and environment, brain and behavior, only a collaboration between them. And this means our lives are not predetermined by a genetic program. Genes are chemical followers. They're little packages of protein covered with receptors that get triggered into expression by the environments, the experiences, and relationships in our lives. So if nurture drives nature, well, there is both good and bad news in that. It means that our brains are a living structure made up of tissue that is the most susceptible to change from experience of any tissue in the human body. When trust and safety are broken, our bodies and our minds get seized by stress. So we have to talk about the biology of stress and what it does to us. And we have to talk about the limbic system, because the limbic system of the brain is the learning and emotion center of the brain. When we experience stress, cortisol is released through our brains and bodies, and it produces that familiar feeling of fight, flight, and freeze. It's intense when it happens, but if the stress is mild or tolerable, it's adaptive. We know it. It makes us alert and sharp. This is our limbic system at work. Attention, concentration, focus, memory, preparation. But when children have persistently high levels of stress, and that stress is not buffered by the presence of a trusted and calm adult, something else happens. Children can get locked in that fight or flight feeling when it won't let up. Now, this is the condition known as toxic stress, also known as PTSD. Cortisol can do a lot of harm to the structures of the limbic system because adversity doesn't just happen to children, it happens inside their brains and bodies through the biologic mechanism of stress. But fortunately, that's not the end of the story. There's a big upside when we turn to another hormone, the hormone oxytocin. This is the hormonal system that produces feelings of trust, love, safety, attachment. And that's not all. Oxytocin hits the very same structures in the brain as cortisol, but oxytocin is the more powerful of the two hormones because it can literally protect children. It can literally protect children at the level of the cell from the damaging effects of cortisol. So relationships that are strong and positive cause the release of oxytocin. And this not only helps children manage stress and offset the damaging effects of cortisol, it actually produces resilience to future stress. So we know this. The human relationship is powerful, and the human relationship and oxytocin are the most powerful example we have of positive context. So there are only three things you need to remember about brain development: the astounding malleability of the human brain, experience-dependent growth, and the role of context. And because of this, there's no such thing as a developing child independent of context. And it is this single point, that carries the enormous opportunity we all have today in this unprecedented moment, because we can build environments, whether physical or virtual, that help our children cope with stress, build resilience, and at the very same time, engage and focus on learning. Wes, there's one story that I want to tell you and your viewers that really powerfully illustrates this story. And it goes back to something called the marshmallow test, which I know many of your viewers have heard of. It was a test conducted back in the 70s at a nursery school at Stanford University. And the nursery school children were put in a room with a marshmallow and presented with a choice: eat the marshmallow right away or wait 15 minutes and get a second marshmallow. Now, the research findings of the children who had this ability to delay gratification and exert self-control for that length of time were correlated with all kinds of success in life: higher SAT scores, college acceptance, and success in later careers. But now, fast forward to 2012, a researcher by the name of Dr. Celeste Kidd, who was then at the University of Rochester, had worked in a homeless shelter. And she asked herself the question, would any of my kids from the shelter have ever waited to get that second marshmallow? So this researcher repeated the marshmallow test under different conditions. She put children in a room with broken crayons, and she promised to come back with brand new ones. And in half the cases, the children got a new set of crayons. But in the other half, she came back and she said, sorry, I don't have any crayons after all. Then she did the marshmallow test. And what do you think happens? Well, the kids who got the new crayons where the promise was kept, they waited and waited and waited for that second marshmallow, no problem. But the kids where the promise was broken gobbled up the marshmallow in front of them right away. So the ability to delay gratification and exert self-control, it turns out has a lot to do with whether you trust the person giving you the marshmallow. But Dr. Kidd did this other thing that was so important in science. She challenged the assumptions in the original test, and she made the leap to understanding that self-control, this skill that is so important to learning, is not just in the child. It's in the child in a context that was designed to reveal the skill. In this case, through the experience of a trusted relationship. This researcher altered the microenvironment around these children. And by doing that, she was able to reveal the skill, the malleable skill of self-control that these children actually had. And she did this by establishing trust with them. So think about what this story means about the environments we could create to reveal the potential skills and talents that exist in all young people. And think about the talents that we as adults often don't see and won't see unless we design the environments to reveal them.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. And it leads us really right to the next question. We have a question from Katie that's probably appropriate for this and the next question I have for you. So I'm going to hold it and remind our audience, if you have questions for Dr. Cantor, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can tonight. We'll do some at the end, but if they come up during, we'll take them on then as well. So tell us more about how to do this now. What schools, teachers, families focus on to restore a sense of safety and to optimize learning during this period at home and at school. What should we focus on and do?
Absolutely. You know, the science of learning and development calls for us to design schools mapped to the way the brain learns. A design that combines 5 elements: positive relationships, environments filled with safety and belonging, integrated supports, the intentional development of the skills, mindsets, and habits that all successful learners have, and rich, meaningful instructional experiences where students discover what they're capable of. You see, the development of a whole child emerges when we combine these 5 elements into experiences that connect to one another, because this is how our brains actually develop. Lots of connections that happen between the structures of the brain, and these connections produce increasingly complex skills. Settings designed with this knowledge of how children learn, that can also recognize the effects of bias and stereotype and break down racist structures, can be an ecological vaccine that is rich in protective factors, ignites the developing brain, promotes wellness, and protects children from the damaging effects of stress and racism, all at the same time. I think every one of you knows that historically, there's been a false choice in education between the things we need to do on social and emotional development, physical and mental health, and the pursuit of academic excellence. Not today. Today, we know that a healthy context for learning and development requires attention to young people's safety, health, mental health, social, emotional, and cognitive development, their academic skills, the development of their identities, and their agency. And not some of these things, all of these things together. You see, the neurobiologic story here is simple. The brain is malleable. A brain under stress is shut down. It can't focus and concentrate. It has little working memory, and it gets easily triggered by emotion. And the way our brains are wired, it is our emotions that drive our cognitive and learning skills. It is our emotions that engage us or shut us down. So today, in this time of COVID and violence and racism and extreme inequity, we have no choice. The path to a calm classroom is a calm brain. The path to learning is a calm brain. And the path to a calm brain is to prioritize activities that do 3 things: establish relationships, routines, and promote resilience. What we're calling the new 3 R's: relationships, routines, and resilience. And every one of these is drawn from the non-negotiables for whole child design that I was speaking about. So no need for false choices here, because all of the practices we're going to talk about can be combined with the teaching of context. In fact, they will improve the engagement and the focus of your students in academic content.
No, that's great. Again, powerful stuff. And this is really where I wanted to go, into the specifics, the practical things that people can do, getting into the practice. Right now, folks are realizing school's opening, however that's defined. It's happening this week, next week, and in the next several weeks. And so what can they do? I'm going to ask you a couple. I'm going to fire a bunch of them at you right here, and we'll break them down. But I wanted to get into that. What are the specific conditions and practices that actually build a calm classroom, as you said, a calm brain? And then how do you implement the 3 R's, the 3 new R's? Katie asked a question similar, which is, what are the simple strategies teachers can implement in the virtual learning model to build strong, healthy relationships with each student? And then Elena Rodriguez said, would love to have ideas for teachers to implement in an online environment the first day of school. So,
okay. Yeah. So here, okay, Wes. So here we go. And I do want your audience to know that the resources that we've prepared just for your community are going to be able to directly support your leaders and your teachers in doing the very things I'm going to talk about. So we've said relationships are the active ingredient in the learning environment because they are the way trust is built, oxytocin is released, limbic system activated, and in fact, trust is the antidote to stress. And relationships are the medium through which we experience trust. So practices like virtual advisories, if you haven't started them yet, start them now. And when you do those advisories, use practices like Rosenthorn as a way to check in on how your students are doing. Let them tell the stories of the rose in their life and the thorns. And do frequent brief hellos via email. These can let your students know that you're thinking about them. Some of our teachers have created a fun hello video and sent it to their students. All of these communications tell the students that they matter to you. If students don't have wireless, or even if they do, the phone, admittedly old-fashioned these days, but phone calls pay big dividends in attendance and engagement. Let your students help you check in with other students. This is a lot to do for a teacher or a leader. Students can help you do it by checking in with other students. And all of this helps to build belonging in your classrooms. And then there are practices like banking time. Banking time is a practice that means you schedule a 10 to 15 minute check-in with individual students, students that maybe are struggling with behavior or attention. And you do it 1 to 3 times a week, depending on what they need. And this is sacred time. It's time for an informal connection, for support, where you follow the lead of what the student wants to talk about and let them tell you what they're experiencing and validate the emotions that they're talking about. What does this do? Builds a bond of trust. We've talked about the importance of trust, but this is also a co-regulating activity. This actually helps the student regulate their emotions because of the kind of quality of contact with you that they've had. This can be done right now to help set students up for success on day one. And then there's looping. Looping is well known, but for some reason, we've thought that it was okay to just have relationships to a teacher that are 1 year long. Well, looping allows students to have relationships with teachers that they're close to over multiple years. And more than anything now, set aside time to rebuild relationships from last year, build new ones, and understand what children have been up to during the spring and summer. Right now, I hear a lot of people assuming losses. Don't assume losses. Some young people have been making meals, doing homework with their younger siblings, helping their working parents. All of these things are accomplishments, and all of these things build skills, including resilience. Do regular family check-ins. Lots of things are happening inside of families, and you need to get a snapshot of what's going on at home. And let's not forget about all of you, the adults, because your wellness is the key to how your students will do. So check out the resources that we're sharing with you about teacher wellness, including this incredible blog series that we have on our website called Back to Basics, which is about our wellness. Many of our schools are using a morning teacher huddle to reinforce the strength of their learning community, even when they're virtual, and to keep tabs on how the teacher community is doing. When we talk about strong routines, I wonder if you know that the brain is actually a prediction machine. It loves order. It loves things to be calm and orderly, and when it knows what's coming next. It gets anxious when things are not predictable. So our task is to build consistent routines in our schools, in our classrooms, in our homes. And this can be done by working with students to create their own daily routine planner. This can be done in school or at home, where students set their own achievable goals for different things. They can be academic things, but also exercise, game time, but leaving opportunities to celebrate successes. And the third priority is resilience. Building resilience is likely the most important task we have for ourselves and our kids. And you might think that resilience is something you either have or you don't, like eye color. But resilience is more like a muscle, and it can be built. And the key to building it is recognizing first that all of us have strengths to build upon, and the key to growing resilience is building our regulation skills, physical, emotional, behavioral, cognitive. And we can do this by creating tiered support systems that include time for skill building, time for relationships, time for writing activities that include naming and describing emotions, meditative practices. Did you know movement is meditative? It's not just mindfulness. Something as simple as breathing, running, preferably with another person, even dancing. Meditative movement is meditation, and doing it with someone else is even better. And providing different levels of emotional and mental health supports, because every student needs to know and have someone they can go to for help, even virtually. And I understand that there are actually many after school and youth development supports here in California. They are already experts in the 3 R's. Partner with them to boost the capacity of your staff to support kids. Because all of the things I've described with the 3 R's were specifically designed to be both virtual and able to be used in person when kids are back in classroom again. But here's the secret sauce in all of this. We said that the brain is a dynamic living structure. It's also an electrical structure. And the fuel for brain development is relationships. So implementing the 3 R's will mean that the majority of kids in your schools will do better. They will engage better as learners. They will develop resilience. And the number of kids who will need individual interventions or who will be in crisis will go down. Now, you may all know this, but the word trauma is a stigma to children who have it. That's why I haven't said much using that word in this talk, because no one who has it wants to be known as having it. No one wants to be taught by somebody where they feel labeled. This sets up a relationship that is deficit oriented from the start. What we all need to know is that trauma causes a disruption in our lives, a disruption to health, to mood, to behavior, to skill development and learning. And it can happen to any of us. But what our kids want to know is that it can be fixed without stigma and without shame.
Wow, and you know, people were asking for specifics. You gave specific strategies that people can implement, and not just the first day of school. They can implement before the first day of school to make those connections, begin building that trust. So very important. We do have teachers as audience. A lot of folks tune in from a variety of backgrounds, but typically ACSA serves school, county, and district administrators. So given all the strategies you've been describing, what should school administrators be doing right now to promote and really drive these practices?
So what I would want school administrators to do, number one, is to set and make visible a whole child vision for your district, so that your district and everyone in it knows that you are prioritizing both wellness and academics, including social, emotional, and physical wellness. Let them know that your decisions about policy and budget and staffing are going to reflect a commitment to supporting yours and your students' wellness. Second, bring coherence to the district priorities that are going on. There's often a lot going on in the name of whole child, in the name of student support. But if you can coordinate it and bring it together as a tiered support system that is robust at every level, especially tier one, because tier one are the universal practices like relationships, the things that I've been talking about belonging and safety, and fair discipline practices, because all of this will help with the disproportionality that you may be experiencing. Third, focus on professional development and strengthening your professional learning community, including learning about the things that I've been talking about, the science of learning and development, the science of stress, and the practices that enable you to operationalize that knowledge every day in your classrooms, because you understand it in a different way. You will look at behavior in a different way. You'll look at learning in a different way. Invest in professional development with a whole child lens so that your staff uses the 3 R's, gets the benefit of coaching and peer learning opportunities. But you have to set aside the time for this. Our website is filled with resources for you and links to wonderful resources that other organizations are producing. And partnerships, because none of us can do this by ourselves. Youth development, mental health after school, strengthen those partnerships. They exist and are plentiful in California, and they have funding, and they have people that can boost your own capacities. So this isn't overwhelming to you. And they're eager to work with you and to support young people and families that you all care about so deeply. And I guess the fifth thing I thought of to say to you all is about patience. That the things that I'm talking about today, these take time to work, and you have to give them a chance. Because logging some miles and spending time, think about when you have tried to master a new skill. How long did it take? What made it successful? Was it coaching, practice, celebrating successes, being mentored? Put those things in place, and you are going to see culture and behavior change. I'm really excited to have had the chance to be able to share some of this with you, and would love to take a few questions, Wes.
Yeah, you bet. The team is looking at the chat right now. We'll see if there are more questions there. While we're waiting, because I don't want to waste any time with you, I have to tell you how grateful I am for so many of the things that you've shared that ACSA has been fighting for, that I didn't even tell you we were fighting for when we chatted recently. You mentioned race and racism in particular. You mentioned the plight of our Black students and communities. ACSA convened with CSBA an anti-racism task force. They had their first meeting last week. We're working on policies, practices, and supports that we can use to eradicate racism in California in public education. And you called that out. I'm so grateful that you did. You also mentioned rigor. We've been fighting for rigor. And you mentioned how it demonstrates what students can do, what they're able to do. It challenges them. And there's so many benefits to the challenges and them meeting those challenges. And we've been fighting for that and saying that even if we open in a virtual environment, we have to have rigorous, equitable learning opportunities for our students, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show. One of the things that I do at the end of this each night that we broadcast is we talk about hope. And I ask our guests what gives them hope. Let me tell you something that gives me hope. You and people like you and the work you're doing, the conversations tonight, give me immeasurable hope. Everyone's feeling stress. I'm a pretty positive dude, but I'd be lying if I said that I don't feel stress sometimes. Certainly my students do. I have a son who's getting ready to apply for college. He'll be a senior this year, and he's in the theater field, and he's got to do everything virtually. And he doesn't know if he's going to be able to do auditions and what does it look like. And the two shows he's been cast in the spring and the summer, both got either canceled or scaled way back where he can barely do it. And every day he puts on a smile. He doesn't complain. My middle daughter graduated from CSU Fullerton this year, and she's ready to hit the ground running and start her career. And then COVID happens. She doesn't get a formal graduation. She's entering the job market in these crazy times, and she smiles and has a positive attitude. But I know that the stress is real for each of them, for my wife. We are going to watch this, my wife and I, back, because when I'm talking to you. I'm listening. I'm trying to engage you. I want to go back and learn some more from this. That kind of knowledge gives me hope, and I believe it gives my family hope. So I want to thank you for providing that hope today. Would you share with our ACSA family something that gives you hope about our future, about public education, etc.?
You know, I do want to share this because my entire life and work has been spent understanding how humans develop and how humans develop when they have been exposed to unbelievable challenges. And in every single story, every experience of looking at what young people can marshal when they have conditions, when they have relationships that enable them to be successful, over and over again in my practice life and now in the work that I do at Turnaround, the developmental science and learning science is a fundamentally optimistic picture about what children are capable of, about what happens when we set the conditions for success. Kids will succeed and kids will thrive. But, you know, in early 20th century, we didn't have all of the knowledge we have today. Today, the biggest issue is using the knowledge that we have today. So your viewers might not know this, but volumes of developmental and learning sciences are packed into those 3 R's. And so let's use them, and let's use them together, because that's the other secret of the 3 R's, is to do all 3. So if we set up those conditions, we are going to see more and more kids engage in learning and embrace the relationships that are going to lead them to be successful. So nobody can knock the hope out of me. And the science validates the hope that I'm sharing with you and the knowledge.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. The only thing that challenged me really was you mentioned meditative movement and you suggested dance and dancing with someone else. When my wife hears that part, she's going to hammer me. She's always telling me I got to dance more, and I'm trying to dance a lot less. So outside of that, everything you said was spot on. Hey, I want to thank you. We don't have any more questions tonight. We want to thank you for your time, for what you've shared, for the resources you've provided. Our members asked for strategies they can use. You shared a variety of strategies that teachers can use, that administrators can use to start this school off, or start this school year off the right way, to prepare for it. So very grateful for that. To all of our folks out there, make sure that you look at the links. The resources are there. The team has put them up several times. Share them in your charters, in your regions, in your districts, and in your counties. As Dr. Cantor said, the information is out there. The knowledge is out there. Let's use it. Let's avail ourselves of it, for heaven's sakes. And let's build those relationships. And don't forget, some of our other partners have come on this program and others. The Flippin Group talks about relationships throughout their work, capturing kids' hearts. So there are resources on the ACSA Resource Hub. There are resources from Turnaround for Children. In any event, thank you, Dr. Cantor. We look forward to working with you more. I think this is a great conversation to have at our conferences this coming year and in our leadership assemblies. I suspect the people on the line would love to hear more and dig deeper with you in a different setting. So thank you, and thank your team for allowing you to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Wes. I do look forward to our partnership unfolding. I really do. Thank you. And thank you to your community.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, everybody. Great stuff tonight. We will see you next Monday night. In the meantime, be well, stay safe.